Imagine you're standing in a small clearing, 40,000 years ago. The fire has gone out, and on the ground in front of you is someone you knew, a friend, a parent, maybe your child. Yesterday they were alive, today they aren't. And you're facing a question that has no instructions, no tradition to fall back on, no elder who's ever explained exactly what to do. What do you do with the body? It sounds like a simple question. It isn't. Because somewhere, at some point in our deep past, a human being looked at a corpse for the very first time and didn't just walk away. They did something. And that single decision, to do something instead of nothing, may be one of the strangest, most important moments in the entire story of our species. So today we're going to ask a question that sounds almost too basic to matter. What did ancient humans actually do with their dead? And the deeper we go, the more complicated the answer gets. At first, the obvious answer seems simple enough. You dig a hole, you bury the body, done. That's basically what most of us picture when we imagine ancient burial. But here's the problem. For most of human history, there's no evidence of burial at all. Early hominins didn't build graves. They didn't mark death with ritual. As far as the evidence shows, bodies were often just left. No stone markers, no ceremony, nothing that survives in the archaeological record. So if burial wasn't automatic, when did it start? And more importantly, why did it start at all? That's where the real story begins. Withier neorperdingend. The earliest strong evidence for deliberate burial comes from sites like Qafzeh Cave in Israel and Sungir Cave nearby, dating back roughly 90,000 to 100,000 years. At Qafzeh, archaeologists found human remains placed in the ground in a way that looks intentional, bodies positioned carefully, not scattered by accident. At one of these sites, a body was found with deer antlers placed near it, deliberately, researchers believe, not by chance. Now think about that for a second. Someone took the time to gather antlers. Someone chose to place them next to a dead body. That's not survival behavior. That's not about hygiene or keeping predators away. That's something closer to meaning. But here's where it gets strange. Not every early human group did this. Some groups, in the same broad time period, show no signs of burial at all, which raises an uncomfortable question. Was burial something all humans naturally developed? Or was it something only certain groups figured out? An idea, spreading slowly, unevenly, like any other invention. To understand why this matters, we have to go even further into the debate. Because it's not just modern humans we're talking about. At a site called Qafzeh Cave in Iraq, archaeologists found the remains of Neanderthals, our close evolutionary cousins, buried in the ground. For decades, one particular idea captured public imagination, that Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, based on pollen found in the soil around one skeleton. The flower burial, as it became known, was treated as proof of Neanderthal compassion, maybe even spirituality. But later research complicated the story. Some scientists argued the pollen could have been introduced by burrowing animals, or blown in much later, long after burial. The debate isn't fully settled. And that uncertainty is actually the whole point. Because it forces us to ask a bigger question. How do you tell the difference between a body that was simply covered up and a body that was buried with meaning? It turns out, that line is much blurrier than we'd like it to be. Meaning fecal fortiaun biramide. Here's where the story escalates. Because burial, once it starts appearing more reliably in the record, doesn't stay simple for long. At Sungir, in what is now Russia, archaeologists uncovered burials roughly 30,000 years old that are almost unbelievable in their complexity. 2 children were buried head to head, surrounded by thousands of ivory beads, beads that would have taken, by some estimates, thousands of hours to make, thousands of hours, for children who likely never lived to adulthood. Think about what that means. This wasn't a quick decision. This wasn't just, let's cover the body and move on. Someone, or some entire community, invested an enormous amount of time and resources into how these 2 children were sent into death. That's not survival instinct. That's a statement about who these children were, about what their lives meant, maybe even about what their community believed would happen to them next. Maybe believe a Musbantham Einers in Udo. And that's really the deeper question hiding underneath all of this. Did ancient humans believe in some kind of afterlife? We can't know for certain. Nobody left behind an explanation. But the pattern of evidence keeps pointing in a suggestive direction. Grave goods, tools, jewelry, weapons, placed with bodies as if they might still be needed. Ochre, a red mineral pigment, found scattered across skeletons in burials from multiple regions and time periods, possibly symbolizing blood, or life, or something we don't fully have a word for. Bodies positioned in specific poses, curled up, as if sleeping or resting. None of this proves belief in an afterlife, but it strongly suggests something else, that ancient humans were not simply disposing of a problem, they were responding to a loss. And loss, it turns out, might be the real engine behind all of this. Because here's the thing about grief. Grief doesn't come with instructions either. It's disorienting, it's confusing, it makes you want to do something, even when there's nothing left to do. Some researchers argue that burial, at its very origin, wasn't primarily about religion or the supernatural at all. It may have started as something more basic, an emotional response to loss, a way of processing that a person who mattered was now gone. The meaning, the ritual, the belief systems, those may have come later, layered on top of something more instinctive. But there's a problem with that idea too, because not every human community handled death the same way, even after burial became common. At Lake Mungo in Australia, archaeologists uncovered evidence dating back roughly 40,000 years showing two dramatically different treatments of the dead within the same region. One body, known today as Mungo Man, was buried with red ochre spread across the remains. Another, Mungo Lady, appears to have been cremated, one of the earliest known cremations anywhere in the world. Burial in one case, fire in the other, same region, similar time period. Completely different response to death. So the mystery deepens. If death created a universal human need to respond, why didn't humans respond in the same way? Maybe that's the real answer. Maybe humans never needed a single, universal answer to death. What they needed was the ability to create meaning, and then the freedom to shape that meaning differently, depending on their beliefs, their environment, their community. Some buried, some burned, some placed the dead in caves. Some, like certain groups studied at Dolní Věstonice in the modern Czech Republic, buried multiple individuals together in elaborate, carefully arranged group graves. The methods changed, but underneath all of them was the same underlying behavior. Humans were not walking away. They were choosing to respond. Widen Yorchum final, and that brings us to something even stranger, a discovery that reopened this entire debate in recent years. Deep inside the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, researchers uncovered the remains of a small-brained hominin species called Homo naledi. The location was nearly impossible to reach, a narrow, twisting passage, far from daylight. Some researchers have proposed that the remains were deliberately placed there, possibly even intentionally buried, which would be extraordinary, since Homo naledi had a brain roughly a third the size of ours. That claim remains highly debated. Many scientists are skeptical, and the evidence is still being examined. But just the possibility raises an enormous question. If a small-brained ancient hominin species really did treat death with intention, then maybe this behavior isn't something that arrived late, alongside big brains and complex language. Maybe it's older, deeper, more fundamental to what it means to be human, or even human-adjacent, than we ever assumed. Wannean sind, nokertuen ausenalp. You're standing there, beside someone who mattered to you, with no tradition telling you what to do next. And somehow, without instructions, without writing, without a rule book passed down from anyone, you decide to do something. Maybe you dig, maybe you gather ochre, maybe you simply arrange the body with care, the way you'd arrange someone who was only sleeping. You don't know it yet, but that decision, repeated by countless people in countless places for tens of thousands of years, becomes cemeteries. It becomes funerals. It becomes the quiet ritual of laying flowers on a grave. Death itself hasn't changed. It's still biological, still permanent, still the same unanswerable silence it always was. But what humans chose to do with it, that part isn't biological at all. That part is entirely, uniquely human. So maybe the real story here was never about what ancient humans did with their dead. Maybe it's about what death, from the very beginning, quietly taught us to become.